Mertz to kind of set the stage, and then he'll pass it on to other speakers.
Is the driver.
Can you see the L just as a one thing? I'm sorry. Okay, great. Thank you.
If you want to zoom in a little bit.
Okay. I'm not sure. Let's see.
That's much better. Thank you.
It makes me feel taller too, so it's all good. Good morning. Thank you for being here. I see some of you who were here with us in January, and at that time, I think you'll recall, we believed that this was a case where Duly Health and Care, which is run by a private equity firm, put its profits over its patients. And in that time, we have learned some things that we think support that. We've discovered evidence since that time that nurses at Northwestern's Central DuPage Hospital reported to the higher-ups at the hospital that they were concerned that Dr. Cannon was intoxicated. And Central DuPage Hospital sent that back to Duly right away and said, you need to deal with this. And we think they took too long. They took 2 weeks before they pulled him out of service. We know from last time that when they did have some patient complaints or some patient concerns that Dr. Cannon was acting oddly and possibly intoxicated, they reviewed him and they set up an improvement plan, which only called for him seeing more patients. They didn't give him the help that they needed. Since that time in January, we have had an additional 47 brave women step forward and agree to be part of our lawsuit to tell their story. And the other thing that's very noteworthy is that in March of this year, the Illinois Department of Professional Regulation consented or obtained a consent from Dr. Cannon to permanently place his license on inactive status. So we think because of the actions of our brave clients, Dr. Cannon is not practicing medicine any longer. He can't.
I'd like to introduce the 4 women we have here today. From my left, we have Amy Fuentes, who experienced a really terribly disturbing event during the delivery of her 4th child. Behind me directly, we have Christina Deek, former patient and coworker of Dr. Cannon. To Mike's right, we have Vesta Eddings, who is a longtime patient of Dr. Cannon's, and she noticed major changes in him towards the end of her care that began to make sense when she learned of Dr. Cannon's problems. And at the very end, we have Elizabeth Gadella, similar to Vesta, a longstanding patient of Dr. Cannon's, who towards the end of her treatment with him experienced some things no patients should experience. I'd like to point out that Duly Health and Care uses the word trust 282 times on its website. We intend to find out why they betrayed that trust for all 53 of our clients, including the 4 brave women standing behind me. We'd like to open it up to questions rather than each individual make a speech or anything like that. I think each of our clients are willing to answer questions.
Can you give your name, sir, please?
Sure. Evan Smola. I'm a partner with Hurley
Spell the
McKenna.
last name, please.
S-M-O-L-A.
Evan, maybe what we can do is we would like to have each one of the women just basically tell us their story so that we're able to properly ask any follow-up questions. I don't know what order they'd like to come forward, and maybe they can just take over one of your spots at the table.
How about if we do this? I'll step out and Evan can introduce each woman's story, and they may or may not say a few words, but you're certainly welcome to ask any questions of them.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Who's first?
I'll go. Sit. Yeah.
Name and spelling your name, please.
My first name is Elizabeth. Last name is Gadella. Gudella. I was a patient of Dr. Cannon, starting in my high school years, went into college years. At the time, there was numerous things that happened. At the time, it didn't register to me how awful it was. And then in January, I saw it come out that there was, other women that things happened to, and just made me completely violated. I just feel really bad for my previous self, and that I didn't register how awful it was. And there's just been a lot of different scenarios that he put me into that are very wrong. So coming forward is just helpful to me, to the women behind me, and then anybody that this is happening to.
Elizabeth, you say it didn't register, but are you able to, excuse me, explain a little bit about what his behavior was like, and, in retrospect, just understanding that was not correct?
At the time, obviously, I was a lot younger, and I was, I have tattoos on my body that can be seen in a setting, in the doctor setting, in that kind of practice. And it started with that, commenting on tattoos that I have, which then fast forward to now, he is now undressed, showing me his tattoos in this position. And then just trying to meet up with me outside of office hours, different things like that. So at the time, it didn't register how wrong it was. Now I realize I'm an adult now, and it's brought up so many feelings now that I now have to go through and face them and address them. I'm sorry, am I getting off track here?
No, that's
It's your
okay.
story. You can tell your story.
Sorry.
How old were you at the time?
So it was different time periods, but between 16 and 26. There was numerous, I'd say, instances I was violated, but there was like 4 big events that as soon as I saw that press conference in January, I immediately flashed back to me at that age, in that position, in that office, and made me come forward now.
Was he ever intoxicated during the procedures or the exams he gave him?
I am not. I don't know. I can't comment that for sure.
You mind if I step in? One of the things I think that's,
But do so closer to us.
Yeah.
so one of the things,
I'm sorry, sir, but we have to sit down, please.
Stacy, you stay.
Ah.
Yeah. One of the aspects of Elizabeth's case that I think is so troubling is that she was a teenager, and Dr. Cannon set up situations where she would have to meet him outside of the office to get certain medical advice and to get certain prescriptions and that sort of thing, which is highly inappropriate. He also attempted to bring her to concerts, and he attempted to get her to set him up with her friends for dates and things like that. So the relationship was incredibly inappropriate.
What do you think should happen as a result of this?
I'm sorry.
What do you think should happen as a result of this?
I feel like it's kind of a loaded question. I don't know full extent. Obviously, he's taken a step to say that he's no longer practicing. So first and foremost, that should be the first thing to come from this. Smaller picture, hopefully this is, because I'm obviously very nervous right now. This is intimidating. But if other women this happened to, or anybody, hopefully that this helps people come forward and to prevent this from happening in other areas with other doctors and other women in vulnerable positions. So what I think should happen is this should become bigger. Everyone should know about this, and he should answer to And so should Duly just answer to what happened here.
What's it been like for you seeking other medical care since this entire thing happened?
Troubling, absolutely. I think being as a female too, not just with the OB-GYN, but just now with any male medical doctor, unfortunately, like that's the world that we live in now. Is we have to be careful. You know, before I would have a doctor, I would never get on Google and like read reviews of a doctor. You just automatically think that that's what they're there to do, help you, you know, give you the medical care that you need. So I think now, since then, it's scary. It's scary. It's troubling. You know, you lose trust in the medical practice as a whole, and that's not fair to all the other doctors.
Can you walk us through, what did you think in real time when your doctor began disrobing in front of you in an office?
Uncomfortable, but I felt, I mean, I was underage, so I feel like I was obviously violated, but to a certain extent where I'm like, he's the doctor, you know? And then being a minor too, I was scared.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Can I follow up on that point? One of the things that we see in these cases is that the patient puts all their faith and trust in the doctor. And there are other people at the medical clinic who should be looking out for their best interests. And so when something odd like this happens, their mind says, well, it must be okay, because if it wasn't, everybody else who's here who's supposed to be taking care of you would have done something about it. So, and I think that that's the reason that we're so concerned about Duly's role. Duly knew, or should have known, of this behavior. It was so prevalent. We think they must have known about it. And we think they should have addressed it far sooner. And we think they didn't. We think the evidence will show that Duly let this go on because they were focused on profit and not on the safety of their patients.
Are you aware if there are any criminal allegations against this doctor?
So that's a good question. We are aware that one of our early clients did make a report to the police, but then we're out of that.
So you're not aware of any criminal activity, any criminal charges?
Yeah, we're not aware one way or the other. Because we're civil lawyers, we don't have privy to that investigation, and so we just don't know.
Let me ask you before we go on to the next story. You mentioned that nurses at DuPage, Northwestern Central DuPage, had reported that they had concerns that he was intoxicated, but it took 2 weeks before they pulled him out of service. What were the dates of this? Can you elaborate a little bit?
I actually have that.
Are there going to be more questions for Elizabeth? Okay, we'll have her step up.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Sure. On September 18th, 2019, two nurses reported to a physician leader at Northwestern concerns about things that had transpired the evening and morning before, patients reporting Dr. Cannon smelling of alcohol. That was immediately conveyed from Central DuPage Hospital to DuPage Medical Group leadership the same day or the next day within 24 hours. Dr. Cannon actually remained practicing from September 18th until he took a leave of absence on October 16th, 2019. So we had the dates a little bit wrong. It's almost a month.
Just for my personal knowledge, was a nurse ever present in the room at the time, or was it just the doctor?
Each of our clients here can answer that, but generally speaking, it was always just the doctor present, no chaperone. I'm sure there are occasions where a chaperone is present, but by and large, for our cases, there was never a chaperone present.
He is no longer licensed in the state of Illinois, is that correct?
Correct.
And what exactly initiated that process?
So our original client who filed as Jane Doe cooperated with the Illinois Department of Professional Regulation, gave an interview, described what happened to her. They then requested interviews from him, material from him, communications from him. He sort of stymied them at every opportunity. He never presented any of that. And eventually when it came to a hearing over, are you going to lose your license or not, he simply signed a consent order saying, I'm going to lose my license. That was in March 3rd of 2023. Next. Vesta Eddings.
Vesta, can you spell your name for us, please?
Yeah. Vesta, Vesta, last name Eddings, Eddings.
What would you like to share with us about what happened to you?
He delivered my son, who's 8, and my 3-year-old. I just want to say, being African American and meeting him to deliver my kids, I felt betrayed. I felt seeing the news a little uncomfortable. I had questions and worries because I was high risk with my pregnancies. So I just was unsure if he gave me the best care I could receive, hearing all the things that were being discovered on the news.
During your interactions with him, did you ever sense that there was anything off? Did you feel he was acting in a professional way?
So I speak with the list, and he did have like a little slur, but I assumed that he spoke that way as well. My mom would be present for my kid's father, and when we did question that, we kind of assumed, like when my mom asked about it, I thought like maybe he speaks with a list like me. Like, or I don't think he would be drunk working in the middle of Wheaton, a Black doctor in Wheaton being drunk. I doubt it. So I gave him the benefit of the doubt, thinking no way a doctor would be working in Wheaton under those kind of situations. And seeing the news in January, I just felt betrayed. I felt worried. And then hearing that more women had way serious things going on than me, kind of just, I felt that I needed to come forward and speak up, because it could have been me, it could have been my daughter if I bring her someday. So I'm sorry that this happened to all the women, and I think that something needs to be done about it. So I came out today.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christina Deeke, Deeke.
Thank you.
Christina, Christina.
Christina, just the same thing, just talk to us about your interactions with Dr. Cannon.
I was a former coworker, worked indirectly with him as he was acquisitioned at the time, their service with Duly. I would onboard all the new providers. So I had indirect but direct, because I was also a patient of his, contact with him. And learning about this in January just brings tears to my eyes, as I currently still work in the medical profession, and for women to take the trust to even go these days, to go for their health cares, to go for their mammograms, I feel betrayed. I do have trust issues now. I pulled all my cases out from Duly and I switched to a completely different medical organization. When I go and see new doctors, I question. I question myself. I have the fear, the anxiety, and the situation that happened was unprofessional what he did. I did not have a chaperone with me in the room, and I do have tattoos on my lower abdomen, and that's how our conversation went. And what medical personnel would be taking off their shirt and showing their patients all their tattoos, where he would unbutton his shirt, took off his lab jacket, and proceeded to show me that he was fully tatted.
One of the things I would add about Christina's case that we find the most disturbing is there was a medical procedure performed during her final visit with Dr. Cannon, the results of which were read by him and reported to her on September 17th, 2019, which is the same day the Northwestern nurses were reporting him as intoxicated in the hospital. So I think it calls into question every medical decision, piece of information that he has conveyed to Christina and others during this time when his partners at Duly should have known what was happening.
Did you ever suspect he was intoxicated?
It took me as odd, because I work with physicians. Why would you take your shirt off with patient, let alone an employee, in an exam room unchaperoned? It did question me, and I didn't say anything. I was just thinking in the back of my head, and then in January when this came out, I noticed that it was other women that were being affected by this situation, that's when I decided to come forward, because I don't want this to happen to any other woman.
When we say intoxicated, are we talking about alcohol or are we talking about some other prescription drug that he was under the influence of?
We know about alcohol, we don't know about the other things. I mean, there are multiple reports of him smelling of alcohol while caring for patients at Duly and at Northwestern. Whether he dealt with any other issues, we don't know yet.
How long were you?
I was his patient for a year because all the other doctors that I went through within Duly either retired or left the practice. And so then I stayed with the practice because they had my medical history. And then after this incident, I pulled everything when I found out and I switched doctors.
Thank you.
My name's Amy Fuentes, AMYFUENTES.
And Amy, just AMY? Walk us through your interactions with Dr. Kim.
Sure. First, I wanted to start by saying that seeing the other ladies come forward. January is what kind of confirmed red flags and odd things that happened during the delivery of my daughter. And just seeing that on the news was really hard.
What happened during the delivery of your daughter?
So in June of 2020, I was at Central DuPage Hospital. I was delivering my daughter. And Dr. Cannon was the doctor on call, so he wasn't the normal doctor that I've seen for my appointments with that pregnancy. It just happened that he was on call that night. And I was ready to deliver, and they had to call Dr. Cannon multiple times to come to the room. And when he finally got to the room, his eye was really droopy, and he was moving slow. And even though I was 100% ready to deliver my baby, he was standing at the back of the room, like looking in the supply cabinet and just kind of standing there out of it, not really reaching for anything, just kind of waiting there. And I actually made a comment to my husband about kind of what's up with the doctor. And he was just overall very slow, and the nurses were actually coaching me to not deliver the baby while we were waiting for Dr. Cannon to get all of his gear on so that he could help.
And in terms of Amy's case, this delivery took place after Dr. Cannon had returned from his leave of absence. And one of the things that we find most concerning is we don't have a good understanding of what Duly was doing when he returned to ensure that he was behaving appropriately and conducting himself appropriately and delivering good medical care. I would think that when you return from a leave of absence related to substance abuse, there would be rigorous oversight of that person for at least a year, I mean, for at least a period of time to confirm that nothing dangerous is happening.
How long was the leave of absence? Do you know?
Yeah, we returned from the leave of absence on January 6th, 2020. So from October 16th, 2019, January 6th, 2020.
Can you speak a little bit about in that moment, what was in your head when you're trying to bring a child into this world and you have all of these questions swirling? The well-being of your soon-to-be newborn is in the hands of this individual. What were you thinking?
I mentioned that I had made a quick comment to my husband about what was up with the doctor, and being that it was my fourth child, I was pretty comfortable in that situation. And so I think that the biggest thing in the front of my mind was focusing on what my job was as a mom. But just having that back of my mind thought of, I know the nurses are taking care of me, and I just really felt like I was at a great hospital and that I was going to receive great care. And so looking back and remembering the red flags, and then seeing the media coverage in January confirm some of the thoughts that I was having. It was really disturbing for me.
Did Dr. Cannon deliver that day? Were there any complications or things that you didn't expect?
Thank God, no.
Did Dr. Cannon say anything to you during delivery that felt odd, or do you have medical advice that felt odd at all?
I don't really remember him saying anything to me. I don't really remember him saying anything when he came in the room. It was kind of a situation where the nurses were trying to hustle because it was time to be delivering a baby, and it just felt very, very slow. And that was the biggest takeaway for me from that moment of what the red flag was, is that this is a situation that we should be hurrying. But I don't remember him speaking to me really.
Attorney, is there anything here in any of these allegations that you think do tinge on criminality? Is there assault anywhere in here? How would you describe that?
I would, I think if everybody asked a female friend of theirs whether they would consent to a medical exam by an intoxicated OB-GYN, they would say no. That was not a consensual exam. It is one of the most intimate, difficult, things that everybody dreads making certain appointments in their lives, and that's when you expect to be with the most trusted doctor you can find. And to learn that he's been intoxicated, I would venture to say that is non-consensual. There are other cases we have that touch on assault, that the original Jane Doe filing alleges that. So in terms of the criminality, it's kind of a gray area because it's not conventional sexual assault, but it is a touching when a person would not otherwise be touched if they had known about the intoxication.
How many women have come to you for assaults?
53.
And you're still looking for more of this?
We're looking for any witnesses that have any information, whether it's former coworkers, patients, anything on that front. But we have 53 women that have come forward. There will be an additional roughly 37 lawsuits filed in the next week.
Are you filing a lawsuit for every woman, or are there any group lawsuits?
Each lawsuit in this context will be individual. There may be some for judicial economy at some point of consolidation of them in front of one judge, but they're individual lawsuits, and each woman makes their own decision on how to proceed.
You're not looking to form a class here.
You can't really generally form a class action for some legal sure reasons in this context. Everybody's experience was different, so you can't treat them all the same. So they'll be individual, likely to be consolidated in front of one judge.
In January, settlement amount was around $1,000 for cases. That's still true, or is there?
No, that's a little bit of a technical thing. None of the cases have settled. Every complaint asks for $50,000 or more. That's just because you get assigned to a particular one. The $50,000 is kind of technical.
In Illinois, you can't actually ask for, you can't ask for a specific. Yeah.
It's under $50,000 for a small claim, so it's a $50,000 to go somewhere else.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Folks, thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming out.
Yeah.